Okay. That's pretty much where we're at. Let's get on with it. Chapter 6. Mall's Well. Oh, you know what? I need my keyboard. Okay. There we go. I'll catch up with chat. Periodically. Chapter 6. Mall's Well. After an early tea, the little country girl strayed into the garden. The enclosure had formerly been very extensive, but was now contracted within small compass, and hemmed about, partly by high wooden fences, and partly by the outbuildings of houses that stood on another street. In its centre was a grass plant, surrounding a ruinous little structure which showed just enough of its original design to indicate that it had once been a summer house. A hop vine, springing from last year's root, was beginning to clamber over it, but would be long in covering the roof with its green mantle. 3 of the 7 gables either fronted or looked sideways, with a dark solemnity of aspect, down into the garden. The black, rich soil had fed itself with the decay of a long period of time, such as fallen leaves, the petals of flowers, and the stalks and seed, vessels of vagrant and lawless plants, more useful after their death than ever while flaunting in the sun. The evil of these departed years would naturally have sprung up again in such rank weeds, symbolic of the transmitted vices of society, as are always prone to root themselves about human dwellings. Phoebe saw, however, that their growth must have been checked by a degree of careful labor, bestowed daily and systematically on the garden. The white double rose bush had evidently been propped up anew against the house since the commencement of the season, and a pear tree and 3 damson trees, which, except a row of currant bushes, constituted the only variety of fruit, bore marks of the recent amputation of several superfluous or defective limbs. There were also a few species of antique and hereditary flowers, in no very flourishing condition, but scrupulously weeded, as if some person, either out of love or curiosity, had been anxious to bring them to such perfection as they were capable of attaining. The remainder of the garden presented a well-selected assortment of esculent vegetables in a praiseworthy state of advancement. Let's look up esculent. Esculent means fit to be eaten or edible. Okay? Summer squashes almost in their golden blossom. Cucumbers, now evincing a tendency to spread away from the main stalk and ramble far and wide. 2 or 3 rows of string beans, and as many more that were about to festoon themselves on poles. Tomatoes, occupying a site so sheltered and sunny that the plants were already gigantic and promised an early and abundant harvest. Phoebe wondered whose care and toil it could have been that had planted these vegetables and kept the soil so clean and orderly. Not surely her cousin Hepzibah, who had no taste nor spirits for the ladylike employment of cultivating flowers, and with her recluse habits and tendency to shelter herself within the dismal shadow of the house. She would hardly have come forth under the speck of open sky to weed and hoe among the fraternity of beans and squashes. Yeah, okay, just a little side note here. I forgot to mention. Yeah, so yeah, Hepzibah is the old maid, unmarried, in her 60s, who is one of the last of the Pinchians there, the one who's come on hard times, Hepzibah. And Phoebe is is a relation who's come to stay with her. She just arrived yesterday. Man. It being her first day of complete estrangement from rural objects, Phoebe found an unexpected charm in this little nook of grass and foliage, and aristocratic flowers, and plebeian vegetables. The eye of heaven seemed to look down into it pleasantly, and with a peculiar smile, as if glad to perceive that nature, where elsewhere overwhelmed and driven out of the dusty town, had here been able to retain a breathing place. The spot acquired a somewhat wilder grace, and yet a very gentle one, from the fact that a pair of robins had built their nest in the pear tree, and were making themselves exceedingly busy and happy in the dark intricacy of its boughs. Bees, too, strange to say, had thought it worth their while to come hither, possibly from the range of hives beside some farmhouse miles away. How many aerial voyages might they have made in quest of honey, or honey-laden, betwixt dawn and sunset? Yet, late as it now was, there still arose a pleasant hum out of one or two of the squash blossoms, in the depths of which these bees were plying their golden labor. There was one other object in the garden which nature might fairly claim as her inalienable property, in spite of whatever man could do to render it his own. This was a fountain, set round with a rim of old mossy stones, and paved in its bed with what appeared to be a sort of mosaic work of variously colored pebbles. The play and slight agitation of the water in its upward gush wrought magically with these variegated pebbles, and made a continually shifting apparition of quaint figures, vanishing too suddenly to be definable. Thence, swelling over the rim of moss-grown stones, the water stole away under the fence through what we regret to call a gutter rather than a channel. Nor must we forget to mention a hen-coop of very reverend antiquity that stood in the farther corner of the garden, not a great way from the fountain. It now contained only Chanticleer, his 2 wives, and a solitary chicken. All of them were pure specimens of a breed which had been transmitted down as an heirloom in the Pincian family, and were said, while in their prime, to have attained almost the size of turkeys, and on the score of delicate flesh, to be fit for a prince's table. In proof of the authenticity of this legendary renown, Hepzibah could have exhibited the shell of a great egg, which an ostrich need hardly have been ashamed of. Be that as it might, the hens were now scarcely larger than pigeons, and had a queer, rusty, withered aspect, and a gouty kind of movement, and a sleepy and melancholy tone throughout all the variations of their clucking and cackling. It was evident that the race had degenerated, like many a noble race besides, in consequence of too strict a watchfulness to keep it pure. These feathered people had existed too long in their distinct variety, a fact of which the present representatives, judging by their lugubrious deportment, seemed to be aware. They kept themselves alive, unquestionably, and laid now and then an egg, and hatched a chicken, not for any pleasure of their own, but that the world might not absolutely lose what had once been so admirable a breed of fowls. The distinguishing mark of the hens was a crest of lamentably scanty growth in these latter days, but so oddly and wickedly analogous to Hepzibah's turban that Phoebe, to the poignant distress of her conscience, but inevitably, was led to fancy a general resemblance betwixt these forlorn bipeds and her respectable relative. The girl ran into the house to get some crumbs of bread, and cold potatoes, and other such scraps as were suitable to the accommodating appetite of fowls. Returning, she gave a peculiar call, which they seemed to recognize. The chicken crept through the pales of the coop, and ran, with some show of liveliness, to her feet, while Chanticleer and the ladies of his household regarded her with queer sidelong glances, and then croaked one to another, as if communicating their sage opinions of her character. So wise as well as antique was their aspect as to give colour to the idea, not merely that they were the descendants of a time-honoured race, but that they had existed in their individual capacity ever since the House of the Seven Gables was founded, and were somehow mixed up with its destiny. They were a species of tutelary sprite, or banshee, although winged and feathered differently from most other guardian angels. Let's look up tutelary real fast. Tutelary. Serving as protector, guardian, or patron, the tutelary spirits of these regions. Tutula. Tutelary, tutula. Okay. With the protection from the state maintained a tutelary relation with a secure. Okay, all right, interesting. Okay. "Here, you odd little chicken," said Phoebe. Here are some nice crumbs for you." The chicken hereupon, though almost as venerable in appearance as its mother, possessing indeed the whole antiquity of its progenitors in miniature, mustered vivacity enough to flutter upward and alight on Phoebe's shoulder. That little fowl pays you a high compliment," said a voice behind Phoebe. Turning quickly, she was surprised at sight of a young man who had found access into the garden by a door opening out of another gable than that whence she had emerged. He held a hoe in his hand, and while Phoebe was gone in quest of the crumbs, had begun to busy himself with drawing up fresh earth about the roots of the tomatoes. "The chicken really treats you like an old acquaintance," continued he in a quiet way, while a smile made his face pleasanter than Phoebe at first fancied it. "Those venerable personages in the coop, too, seem very affably disposed. You are lucky to be in their good graces so soon. They've known me much longer, but they never honour me with any familiarity, though hardly a day passes without my bringing them food. Miss Hepzibah, I suppose, will interweave the fact with her other traditions, and set it down that the fowls know you to be a Pincian." "The secret is," said Phoebe, smiling, "that I have learned how to talk with hens and chickens." "Ah, but these hens," answered the young man, "these hens of aristocratic lineage would scorn to understand the vulgar language of a barnyard fowl. I prefer to think, and so would Miss Hepzibah, that they recognize the family tone. For you are a Pincian?" "My name is Phoebe Pincian," said the girl, with a manner of some reserve, for she was aware that her new acquaintance could be no other than the daguerreotypist, of whose lawless propensities the old maid had given her a disagreeable idea. "I did not know that my cousin Hepzibah's garden was under another person's care." "Yes," said Holgrave. "I dig and hoe and weed in this black old earth for the sake of refreshing myself with what little nature and simplicity may be left in it, after men have so long sown and reaped here. I turn up the earth by way of pastime. My sober occupation, so far as I have any, is with a lighter material. In short, I make pictures out of sunshine, and not to be too much dazzled with my own trade, I have prevailed with Miss Hepzibah to let me lodge in one of these dusky gables. It is like a bandage over one's eyes to come into it. But would you like to see a specimen of my productions?" "A daguerreotype likeness, do you mean?" asked Phoebe with less reserve, for in spite of prejudice, her own youthfulness sprang forward to meet his. "I don't much like pictures of that sort. They are so hard and stern, besides dodging away from the eye and trying to escape altogether. They are conscious of looking very unamiable, I suppose, and therefore hate to be seen." "If you would permit me," said the artist, looking at Phoebe, "I should like to try whether the daguerreotype can bring out disagreeable traits on a perfectly amiable face. But there certainly is truth in what you have said. Most of my likenesses do look unamiable, but the very sufficient reason, I fancy, is because the originals are so. There is a wonderful insight in heaven's broad and simple sunshine. While we give it credit only for depicting the merest surface, it actually brings out the secret character with a truth that no painter would ever venture upon, even could he detect it. There is, at least, no flattery in my humble line of art. Now, here is a likeness which I have taken over and over again, and still with no better results. Yet the original wears, to common eyes, a very different expression. It would gratify me to have your judgment on this character." He exhibited a daguerreotype miniature in a morocco case. Phoebe merely glanced at it and gave it back. "I know the face," she replied, "for its stern eye has been following me about all day, as my Puritan ancestor, who hangs yonder in the parlour. To be sure, you have found some way of copying the portrait without its black velvet cap and grey beard, and have given him a modern coat and satin cravat instead of his cloak and band. I don't think him improved by your alterations." "You would have seen other differences had you looked a little longer," said Holgrave, laughing, yet apparently much struck. "I can assure you that this is a modern face, and one which you will very probably meet. Now the remarkable point is that the original wears, to the world's eye, and for aught I know to his most intimate friends, an exceedingly pleasant countenance, indicative of benevolence, openness of heart, sunny good humour, and other praiseworthy qualities of that cast. The sun, as you see, tells quite another story, and will not be coaxed out of it, after half a dozen patient attempts on my part. Here we have the man, sly, subtle, hard, imperious, and withal cold as ice. Look at that eye. Would you like to be at its mercy? At that mouth, could it ever smile? And yet, if you could only see the benign smile of the original, it is so much the more unfortunate, as he is a public character of some eminence, and the likeness was intended to be engraved." "Well, I don't wish to see it any more," observed Phoebe, turning away her eyes. "It is certainly very like the old portrait, but my cousin Hepzibah has another picture, a miniature. If the original is still in the world, I think he might defy the sun to make him look stern and hard." "Oh, you've seen that picture, then?" exclaimed the artist, with an expression of much interest. "I never did, but have a great curiosity to do so. And you judge favourably of the face?" "There never was a sweeter one," said Phoebe. "It's almost too soft and gentle for a man's." "Is there nothing wild in the eye?" continued Holgrave, so earnestly that it embarrassed Phoebe, as did also the quiet freedom with which he presumed on their so recent acquaintance. "Is there nothing dark or sinister anywhere? Could you not conceive the original to have been guilty of a great crime?" "It is nonsense," said Phoebe, a little impatiently, "for us to talk about a picture which you have never seen. You mistake it for some other. A crime, indeed. Since you are a friend of my cousin Hepzibah's, you should ask her to show you the picture." "It will suit my purpose still better to see the original," replied the daguerreotypist coolly. "As to his character, we need not discuss its points. They have already been settled by a competent tribunal, or one which called itself competent. But stay, do not go yet, if you please. I have a proposition to make you." Phoebe was on the point of retreating, but turned back with some hesitation, for she did not exactly comprehend his manner, although on better observation its feature seemed rather to be lack of ceremony than any approach to offensive rudeness. There was an odd kind of authority, too, in what he now proceeded to say, rather as if the garden were his own than a place to which he was admitted merely by Hepzibah's courtesy. "If agreeable to you," he observed, "it would give me pleasure to turn over these flowers, and those ancient and respectable fowls, to your care. Coming fresh from country air and occupations, you'll soon feel the need of some such out-of-door employment. My own sphere does not so much lie among flowers. You can trim and tend them, therefore, as you please, and I will ask only the least trifle of a blossom now and then in exchange for all the good, honest kitchen vegetables with which I propose to enrich Miss Hepzibah's table. So we will be fellow labourers, somewhat on the community system." Silently, and rather surprised at her own compliance, Phoebe accordingly betook herself to weeding a flower-bed, but busied herself still more with cogitations respecting this young man, with whom she so unexpectedly found herself on terms approaching to familiarity. She did not altogether like him. His character perplexed the little country girl, as it might a more practised observer. For while the tone of his conversation had generally been playful, the impression left on her mind was that of gravity, and, except as his youth modified it, almost sternness. She rebelled, as it were, against a certain magnetic element in the artist's nature, which he exercised towards her, possibly without being conscious of it. After a little while, the twilight, deepened by the shadows of the fruit trees and the surrounding buildings, threw an obscurity over the garden. "There," said Holgrave, "it's time to give over work. That last stroke of the hoe has cut off a beanstalk. Good night, Miss Phoebe Pincher. Any bright day, if you will put one of those rosebuds in your hair and come to my rooms in Central Street, I will seize the purest ray of sunshine and make a picture of the flower and its wearer." He retired towards his own solitary gable, but turned his head on reaching the door, and called to Phoebe with a tone which certainly had laughter in it, yet which seemed to be more than half in earnest. "Be careful not to drink at Mall's Well," said he. "Neither drink nor bathe your face in it." "Mall's Well," answered Phoebe. "Is that it with the rim of mossy stones? I have no thought of drinking there, but why not?" "Oh," rejoined the daguerreotypist, "because, like an old lady's cup of tea, it is water bewitched." He vanished, and Phoebe, lingering a moment, saw a glimmering light, and then the steady beam of a lamp in a chamber of the gable. On returning into Hepzibah's apartment of the house, she found the low-studded parlour so dim and dusky that her eyes could not penetrate the interior. She was indistinctly aware, however, that the gaunt figure of the old gentlewoman was sitting in one of the straight-backed chairs, a little withdrawn from the window, the faint gleam of which showed the blanched paleness of her cheek, turned sideways towards a corner. "Shall I light a lamp, Cousin Hepzibah?" she asked. "Do, if you please, my dear child," answered Hepzibah. "But put it on the table, in the corner of the passage. My eyes are weak, and I can seldom bear the lamplight on them." What an instrument is the human voice! How wonderfully responsive to every emotion of the human soul! In Hepzibah's tone, at that moment, there was a certain rich depth and moisture, as if the words, commonplace as they were, had been steeped in the warmth of her heart. Again, while lighting the lamp in the kitchen, Phoebe fancied that her cousin spoke to her. "In a moment, cousin," answered the girl. "These matches just glimmer and go out." But instead of a response from Hepzibah, she seemed to hear the murmur of an unknown voice. It was strangely indistinct, however, and less like articulate words than an unshaped sound, such as would be the utterance of feeling and sympathy, rather than of the intellect. So vague was it that its impression or echo in Phoebe's mind was that of unreality. She concluded that she must have mistaken some other sound for that of the human voice, or else that it was altogether in her fancy. She set the lighted lamp in the passage and again entered the parlour. Hepzibah's form, though its sable outline mingled with the dusk, was now less imperfectly visible. In the remoter parts of the room, however, its walls being so ill-adapted to reflect light, there was nearly the same obscurity as before. "Cousin," said Phoebe, "did you speak to me just now?" "No, child," replied Hepzibah. Fewer words than before, but with the same mysterious music in them. Mellow, melancholy, yet not mournful, the tone seemed to gush up out of the deep well of Hepzibah's heart, all steeped in its profoundest emotion. There was a tremor in it, too, that, as all strong feeling is electric, partly communicated itself to Phoebe. The girl sat silently for a moment, but soon, her senses being very acute, she became conscious of an irregular respiration in an obscure corner of the room. Her physical organization, moreover, being at once delicate and healthy, gave her a perception, operating with almost the effect of a spiritual medium, that somebody was near at hand. "My dear cousin," asked she, overcoming an indefinable reluctance, "is there not someone in the room with us?" "Phoebe, my dear little girl," said Hepzibah, after a moment's pause, "you were up betimes, and have been busy all day. Pray go to bed, for I am sure you must need rest. I will sit in the parlor a while and collect my thoughts. It has been my custom for more years, child, than you have lived." While thus dismissing her, the maiden lady stepped forward, kissed Phoebe, and pressed her to her heart, which beat against the girl's bosom with a strong, high, and tumultuous swell. How came there to be so much love in this desolate old heart that it could afford to well over thus abundantly? "Good night, cousin," said Phoebe, strangely affected by Hepzibah's manner. "If you begin to love me, I am glad." She retired to her chamber, but did not soon fall asleep, nor then very profoundly. At some uncertain period, in the depths of the night, and as it were through the thin veil of a dream, she was conscious of a footstep mounting the stairs heavily, but not with force and decision. The voice of Hepzibah, with a hush through it, was going up along with the footsteps, and again, responsive to her cousin's voice, Phoebe heard that strange, vague murmur, which might be likened to an indistinct shadow of human utterance. All righty. We'll get on with chapter 7 in just a minute there. Okay, I can't decide yet whether or not this actually is a ghost story. I mean, it's kind of setting it up like it is, but I'm not convinced that it is. I guess we're going to find out eventually. Oh, I mean, of course we will find out eventually, but for now, it's a bit odd. Let me just open up Discord on my phone here. 1 second. Oh, Smooth Criminal's YouTube app just updated. Nice. Very good. Okay. So far, so good. Just have a little sip of water, then we'll pop right on into the next chapter. Alrighty. Oh yeah, so if I can manage to get Streamlabs operating on YouTube, which I think I can. We can get some little alerts going. I'm not going to add audio to them this time. It's just like little things there to like pop up and down over there on the right side of the screen. I think that real estate over there, I think is going to be just right for that. Yeah, good morning, Anya. This is you keeping your mouth shut. Alrighty, fair enough. I'll take your word for it. Man, alrighty. Okay, anyway, good morning. Good morning. Maybe Mr. BWH will pop in there as well. There we go. Alrighty. Oh boy. Oh boy. Mr. Blanton gets a little trigger happy. A little trigger happy with his mod powers there. Okay. Giona prefers the silent alerts. Yeah. Oh, BW is here. All right. Very nice. Very nice. Very cool. Alrighty. And let's get on with it. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. We'll see how it goes. The Guest. When Phoebe awoke, which she did with the early twittering of the conjugal couple of robins in the pear tree, she heard movements below stairs, and hastening down, found Hepzibah already in the kitchen. She stood by a window, holding a book in close contiguity to her nose, as if with the hope of gaining an olfactory acquaintance with its contents, since her imperfect vision made it not very easy to read them. If any volume could have manifested its essential wisdom in the mode suggested, it would certainly have been the one now in Hepzibah's hand, and the kitchen, in such an event, would forthwith have streamed with the fragrance of venison, turkeys, capons, larded partridges, puddings, cakes, and Christmas pies, in all manner of elaborate mixture and concoction. It was a cookery book, full of innumerable old fashions of English dishes, and illustrated with engravings, which represented the arrangements of the table at such banquets as it might have befitted a nobleman to give in the great hall of his castle. And amid these rich and potent devices of the culinary art, not one of which probably had been tested within the memory of any man's grandfather, poor Hepzibah was seeking for some nimble little titbit, which, with what skill she had, and such materials as were at hand, she might toss up for breakfast. You got me confused there. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Right, Giona. Right. Okay, sorry, I got distracted by chat for a minute there. Soon, with a deep sigh, she put aside the savory volume, and inquired of Phoebe whether old Speckle, as she called one of the hens, had laid an egg the preceding day. Phoebe ran to see, but returned without the expected treasure in her hand. At that instant, however, the blast of a fish-dealer's conch was heard, announcing his approach along the street. With energetic raps at the shop window, Hepzibah summoned the man in, and made purchase of what he warranted as the finest mackerel in his cart, and as fat a one as ever he felt with his finger so early in the season. Requesting Phoebe to roast some coffee, which she casually observed was the real mocha, and so long kept that each of the small berries ought to be worth its weight in gold, the maiden lady helped fuel into the vast receptacle of the ancient fireplace in such quantity as soon to drive the lingering dusk out of the kitchen. The country girl, willing to give her utmost assistance, proposed to make an Indian cake, after her mother's peculiar method of easy manufacture, and which she could vouch for as possessing a richness, and, if rightly prepared, a delicacy, unequalled by any other mode of breakfast cake. Hepzibah gladly assenting, the kitchen was soon the scene of savory preparation. Perchance, amid their proper element of smoke, which eddied forth from the ill-constructed chimney, the ghosts of departed cook-maids looked wonderingly on, or peeped down the great breadth of the flue, despising the simplicity of the projected meal, yet ineffectually pining to thrust their shadowy hands into each inchoate dish. The half-starved rats, at any rate, stole visibly out of their hiding-places, and sat on their hind legs, snuffing the fumy atmosphere, and wistfully, awaiting an opportunity to nibble. Let's look up inchoate real fast. Inchoate. Just begun and not so fully formed or developed. Rudimentary. All right, fair enough, fair enough. Very good. Okay. Oh, you know what? Here's something else I need to look up too. I don't know if chat shows up in the VODs here on YouTube. I don't know. Out of love, he says. Hepzibah had no natural turn for cookery, and, to say the truth, had fairly incurred her present meagreness by often choosing to go without her dinner rather than be attendant on the rotation of the spit or evolution of the pot. Her zeal over the fire, therefore, was quite an heroic test of sentiment. It was touching and positively worthy of tears, if Phoebe, the only spectator, except the rats and ghosts aforesaid, had not been better employed than in shedding them. To see her rake out a bed of fresh and glowing coals, and proceed to broil the mackerel. Her usually pale cheeks were all ablaze with heat and hurry. She watched the fish with as much tender care and minuteness of attention as if, we know not how to express it otherwise, as if her own heart were on the gridiron, and her immortal happiness were involved in its being done precisely to a turn. Life, within doors, has few pleasanter prospects than a neatly arranged and well-provisioned breakfast table. We come to it freshly in the dewy youth of the day, and when our spiritual and sensual elements are in better accord than at a later period, so that the material delights of the morning meal are capable of being fully enjoyed, without any very grievous reproaches, whether gastric or conscientious, for yielding even a trifle overmuch to the animal department of our nature. The thoughts, too, that run around the ring of familiar guests have a piquancy and mirthfulness, and oftentimes a vivid truth, which more rarely find their way into the elaborate intercourse of dinner. Hepzibah's small and ancient table, supported on its slender and graceful legs, and covered with a cloth of the richest damask, looked worthy to be the scene and centre of one of the cheerfulest of parties. The vapor of the broiled fish arose like incense from the shrine of a barbarian idol, while the fragrance of the mocha might have gratified the nostrils of a tutelary la, or whatever power has scope over a modern breakfast table. Phoebe's Indian cakes were the sweetest offering of all, in their hue befitting the rustic altars of the innocent and golden age, or so brightly yellow were they, resembling some of the bread which was changed to glistening gold when Midas tried to eat it. The butter must not be forgotten, butter which Phoebe herself had churned in her own rural home, and brought it to her cousin as a propitiatory gift, smelling of clover blossoms and diffusing the charm of the pastoral scenery through the dark-panelled parlor. All this, with the quaint gorgeousness of the old china cups and saucers, and the crested spoons, and a silver cream jug, Hepzibah's only other article of plate, and shaped like the rudest porringer, set out a board at which the stateliest of old Colonel Pinchian's guests need not have scorned to take his place. But the Puritan's face scowled down out of the picture, as if nothing on the table pleased his appetite. What is a porringer? Noun, okay, yeah. Historical, a small bowl, typically with a handle, used for soup, stew, or similar dishes. Okay. Man, we've been looking up a bunch of words today. Good Lord. By way of contributing what grace she could, Phoebe gathered some roses and a few other flowers, possessing either scent or beauty, and arranged them in a glass pitcher, which, having long ago lost its handle, was so much the fitter for a flower vase. The early sunshine, as fresh as that which peeped into Eve's bower while she and Adam sat at breakfast there, came twinkling through the branches of the pear tree, and fell quite across the table. All was now ready. There were chairs and plates for 3. A chair and plate for Hepzibah, the same for Phoebe. But what other guest did her cousin look for? Throughout this preparation there had been a constant tremor in Hepzibah's frame, an agitation so powerful that Phoebe could see the quivering of her gaunt shadow as thrown by the firelight on the kitchen wall, or by the sunshine on the parlor floor. Its manifestations were so various and agreed so little with one another that the girl knew not what to make of it. Sometimes it seemed an ecstasy of delight and happiness. At such moments Hepzibah would fling out her arms and enfold Phoebe in them, and kiss her cheek as tenderly as ever her mother had. She appeared to do so by an inevitable impulse, and as if her bosom were oppressed with tenderness, of which she must needs pour out a little, in order to gain breathing room. The next moment, without any visible cause for the change, her unwonted joy shrank back, appalled, as it were, and clothed itself in mourning. Or it ran and hid itself, so to speak, in the dungeon of her heart, where it had long lain chained, while a cold, spectral sorrow took the place of the imprisoned joy that was afraid to be enfranchised. A sorrow as black as that was bright. She often broke into a little nervous, hysteric laugh, more touching than any tears could be, and forthwith, as if to try which was the most touching, a gush of tears would follow, or perhaps the laughter and tears came both at once and surrounded our poor Hepzibah, in a moral sense, with a kind of pale, dim rainbow. Towards Phoebe, as we have said, she was affectionate, far tenderer than ever before in their brief acquaintance, except for that one kiss on the preceding night, yet with a continually recurring pettishness and irritability. She would speak sharply to her, then, throwing aside all the starched reserve of her ordinary manner, ask pardon, and the next instant renew the just forgiven injury. At last, when their mutual labor was all finished, she took Phoebe's hand in her own trembling one. "Bear with me, my dear child," she cried, "for truly my heart is full to the brim. Bear with me, for I love you, Phoebe, though I speak so roughly. Think nothing of it, dearest child. By and by I shall be kind, and only kind." "Oh, my dearest cousin, cannot you tell me what has happened?" asked Phoebe, with a sunny and tearful sympathy. "What is it that moves you so?" "Oh, hush, hush, he's coming," whispered Hepzibah, hastily wiping her eyes. "Let him see you first, Phoebe, for you are young and rosy, and cannot help letting a smile break out, whether or no. He always liked bright faces, and mine is old now, and the tears are hardly dry on it. He never could abide tears. There, draw the curtain a little, so that the shadow may fall across his side of the table. But let there be a good deal of sunshine, too, for he was never fond of gloom, as some people are. He has had but little sunshine in his life. Poor Clifford! And oh, what a black shadow! Poor, poor Clifford!" Thus, murmuring in an undertone, as if speaking rather to her own heart than to Phoebe, the old gentlewoman stepped on tiptoe about the room, making such arrangements as suggested themselves at the crisis. Meanwhile, there was a step in the passageway above stairs. Phoebe recognized it as the same which had passed upward, as through her dream, in the night-time. The approaching guest, whoever it might be, appeared to pause at the head of the staircase. He paused twice or thrice in the descent. He paused again at the foot. Each time the delay seemed to be without purpose, but rather from a forgetfulness of the purpose which had set him in motion, or as if the person's feet came involuntarily to a standstill because the motive power was too feeble to sustain his progress. Finally, he made a long pause at the threshold of the parlor. He took hold of the knob of the door, then loosened his grasp without opening it. Hepzibah, her hands convulsively clasped, stood gazing at the entrance. "Dear cousin Hepzibah, pray don't look so," said Phoebe, trembling, for her cousin's emotion and this mysteriously reluctant step made her feel as if a ghost were coming into the room. "You really frighten me. Him. Oh, no, boy, I've got the wrong people talking. Oh, yeah. Okay, this is Phoebe." "Dear cousin Hepzibah, pray don't look so," said Phoebe, trembling, for her cousin's emotion and this mysteriously reluctant step made her feel as if a ghost were coming into the room. "You really frighten me. Is something awful going to happen?" "Hush," whispered Hepzibah. "Be cheerful. Whatever may happen, be nothing but cheerful." The final pause at the threshold proved so long that Hepzibah, unable to endure the suspense, rushed forward, threw open the door, and led in the stranger by the hand. At the first glance, Phoebe saw an elderly personage in the old-fashioned dressing-gown of faded damask, and wearing his gray or almost white hair of an unusual length. It quite overshadowed his forehead, except when he thrust it back and stared vaguely about the room. After a very brief inspection of his face, it was easy to conceive that his footstep must necessarily be such an one as that which, slowly and with as indefinite an aim as a child's first journey across a floor, had just brought him hitherward. Yet there were no tokens that his physical strength might not have sufficed for a free and determined gait. It was the spirit of a man that could not walk. The expression of his countenance, while notwithstanding it had the light of reason in it, seemed to waver and glimmer and nearly to die away, and feebly to recover itself again. It was like a flame which we see twinkling among half-extinguished embers. We gaze at it more intently than if it were a positive blaze, gushing vividly upward, more intently, but with a certain impatience, as if it ought either to kindle itself into satisfactory splendor, or be at once extinguished. For an instant, after entering the room, the guest stood still, retaining Hepzibah's hand instinctively, as a child does that of the grown person who guides it. He saw Phoebe, however, and caught an illumination from her youthful and pleasant aspect, which indeed threw a cheerfulness about the parlor, like the circle of reflected brilliancy around the glass vase of flowers that was standing in the sunshine. He made a salutation, or to speak nearer the truth, an ill-defined, abortive attempt at curtsy. Imperfect as it was, however, it conveyed an idea, or at least gave a hint of indescribable grace, such as no practised art of external manners could have attained. It was too slight to seize upon at the instant, yet, as recollected afterwards, seemed to transfigure the whole man. "Dear Clifford," said Hepzibah, in the tone with which one soothes a wayward infant, "this is our cousin Phoebe, little Phoebe Pincheon, Arthur's only child, you know. She has come from the country to stay with us a while, for our old house has grown to be very lonely now." "Phoebe, Phoebe, Pincheon, Phoebe," repeated the guest, with a strange, sluggish, ill-defined utterance. "Arthur's child? Ah, I forget. No matter. She's very welcome." "Oh, come, dear Clifford, take this chair," said Hepzibah, leading him to his place. Pray, Phoebe, lower the curtain a very little more. Now let us begin breakfast." The guest seated himself in the place assigned him, and looked strangely around. He was evidently trying to grapple with the present scene, and bring it home to his mind with a more satisfactory distinctness. He desired to be certain, at least, that he was here, in the low-studded, cross-beamed, oaken-panelled parlour, and not in some other spot which had stereotyped itself into his senses. But the effort was too great to be sustained with more than a fragmentary success. Continually, as we may express it, he faded away out of his place, or in other words, his mind and consciousness took their departure, leaving his wasted, grey, and melancholy figure, a substantial emptiness, a material ghost, to occupy his seat at table. Again, after a blank moment, there would be a flickering taper gleam in his eyeballs. It betokened that his spiritual part had returned, and he was doing its best to kindle the heart's household fire, and light up intellectual lamps in the dark and ruinous mansion, where it was doomed to be a forlorn inhabitant. At one of these moments of less torpid, yet still perfect animation, Phoebe became convinced of what she had at first rejected as too extravagant and startling an idea. She saw that the person before her must have been the original of the beautiful miniature in her cousin Hepzibah's possession. Indeed, with a feminine eye for costume, she had at once identified the damask dressing-gown which enveloped him, as the same in figure, material, and fashion with that so elaborately represented in the picture. This old faded garment, with all its pristine brilliancy extinct, seemed in some indescribable way to translate the wearer's untold misfortune and make it perceptible to the beholder's eye. It was the better to be discerned by this exterior type how worn and old were the soul's more immediate garments. That form and countenance, the beauty and grace of which had almost transcended the skill of the most exquisite of artists. It could the more adequately be known that the soul of the man must have suffered some miserable wrong from its earthly experience. There he seemed to sit, with a dim veil of decay and ruin betwixt him and the world, but through which, at flitting intervals, might be caught the same expression, so refined, so softly imaginative, which Malbone, venturing a happy touch with suspended breath, had imparted to the miniature. There had been something so innately characteristic in this look that all the dusky years and the burden of unfit calamity which had fallen upon him did not suffice utterly to destroy it. Hepzibah had now poured out a cup of deliciously fragrant coffee and presented it to her guest. As his eyes met hers, he seemed bewildered and disquieted. "Is this you, Hepzibah?" he murmured sadly. Then, more apart, and perhaps unconscious that he was overheard, "How changed! How changed! And is she angry with me? Why does she bend her brow so?" Poor Hepzibah! It was that wretched scowl which time and her near-sightedness and the fret of inward discomfort had rendered so habitual that any vehemence of mood invariably evoked it. But at the indistinct murmur of his words her whole face grew tender, and even lovely, with sorrowful affection. The harshness of her features disappeared, as it were, behind the warm and misty glow. "Angry," she repeated. "Angry with you, Clifford." Her tone, as she uttered the exclamation, had a plaintive and really exquisite melody thrilling through it, yet without subduing a certain something which an obtuse auditor might still have mistaken for asperity. It was as if some transcendent musician should draw a soul-thrilling sweetness out of a cracked instrument which makes its physical imperfection heard in the midst of ethereal harmony. So deep was the sensibility that found an organ in Hepzibah's voice. "There is nothing but love here, Clifford," she added. "Nothing but love. You are at home." The guest responded to her tone by a smile which did not half light up his face. Feeble as it was, however, and gone in a moment, it had a charm of wonderful beauty. It was followed by a coarser expression, or one that had the effect of coarseness on the fine mold and outline of his countenance, because there was nothing intellectual to temper it. It was a look of appetite. He ate food with what might almost be termed voracity, and seemed to forget himself, Hepzibah, and the young girl, and everything else around him, in the sensual enjoyment which the bountifully spread table afforded. In his natural system, though high-wrought and delicately refined, a sensibility to the delights of the palate was probably inherent. It would have been kept in check, however, and even converted into an accomplishment, and one of the thousand modes of intellectual culture had his more ethereal characteristics retained their vigor. But as it existed now, the effect was painful, and made Phoebe droop her eyes. In a little while the guest became sensible of the fragrance of the yet untasted coffee. He quaffed it eagerly. The subtle essence acted on him like a charmed draught, and caused the opaque substance of his animal being to grow transparent, or at least translucent, so that a spiritual gleam was transmitted through it, with a clearer luster than hitherto. "More, more," he cried, with nervous haste in his utterance, as if anxious to retain his grasp of what sought to escape him. "Oh, this is what I need. Give me more." Under this delicate and powerful influence he sat more erect, and looked out from his eyes with a glance that took note of what it rested on. It was not so much that his expression grew more intellectual. This, though it had its share, was not the most peculiar effect. Neither was what we call the moral nature so forcibly awakened as to present itself in remarkable prominence. But a certain fine temper of being was now not brought out in full relief, but changeably and imperfectly betrayed, of which it was the function to deal with all beautiful and enjoyable things. In a character where it should exist as the chief attribute, it would bestow on its possessor an exquisite taste and an enviable susceptibility of happiness. Beauty would be his life, his aspirations would all tend toward it, and allowing his frame and physical organs to be in consonance, his own developments would likewise be beautiful. Such a man should have nothing to do with sorrow, nothing with strife, nothing with the martyrdom which in an infinite variety of shapes awaits those who have the heart, and will, and conscience to fight a battle with the world. To these heroic tempers, such martyrdom is the richest meed in the world's gift. To the individual before us, it could only be a grief intense in due to proportion with... One second. To the individual before us, it could only be a grief, intense in due proportion with the severity of the infliction. He had no right to be a martyr, and beholding him so fit to be happy, and so feeble for all other purposes, a generous, strong, and noble spirit would, methinks, have been ready to sacrifice what little enjoyment it might have planned for itself. It would have flung down the hopes, so paltry in its regard, if thereby the wintry blasts of our rude sphere might come tempered to such a man. Good gracious, some of these sentences. Man. Very good. Okay. Not to speak it harshly or scornfully, it seemed Clifford's nature to be a sybarite. All right, okay, what is a sybarite? Good gracious. Okay, sybarite, a person who is self-indulgent in their fondness for sensuous luxury. All right. Sounds good, sybarite. It seemed Clifford's nature to be a sybarite. It was perceptible, even there in the dark old parlor, in the inevitable polarity with which his eyes were attracted towards the quivering play of sunbeams through the shadowy foliage. It was seen in his appreciating notice of the vase of flowers, the scent of which he inhaled with a zest almost peculiar to a physical organization, so refined that spiritual ingredients are molded in with it. It was betrayed in the unconscious smile with which he regarded Phoebe, whose fresh and maidenly figure was both sunshine and flowers, their essence in a prettier and more agreeable mode of manifestation. Not less evident was this love and necessity for the beautiful in the instinctive caution with which, even so soon, his eyes turned away from his hostess and wandered to any quarter rather than come back. It was Hepzibah's misfortune, not Clifford's fault. How could he, so yellow as she was, so wrinkled, so sad of mien, with that odd uncouthness of a turban on her head, and that most perverse of scowls contorting her brow, how could he love to gaze at her? But did he owe her no affection for so much as she had silently given? He owed her nothing. A nature like Clifford's can contract no debts of that kind. It is, we say it without censure, nor in the diminution of the claim which it indefeasibly possesses on beings of another mould. It is always selfish in its essence, and we must give it leave to be so, and heap up our heroic and disinterested love upon it so much the more, without a recompense. Poor Hepzibah knew this truth, or at least acted on the instinct of it. So long estranged from what was lovely as Clifford had been, she rejoiced, though with a present sigh, and a secret purpose to shed tears in her own chamber, that he had brighter objects now before his eyes than her aged and uncomely features. They never possessed a charm, and if they had, the canker of her grief for him would long since have destroyed it. The guest leaned back in his chair. Mingled in his countenance with a dreamy delight, there was a troubled look of effort and unrest. He was seeking to make himself more fully sensible of the scene around him, or perhaps, dreading it to be a dream or a play of imagination, was vexing the fair moment with a struggle for some added brilliancy and more durable illusion. "How pleasant, how delightful," he murmured, but not as if addressing anyone. "Will it last? How balmy the atmosphere through that open window." "An open window? How beautiful that play of sunshine! Those flowers, how very fragrant! That young girl's face, how cheerful, how blooming! A flower with the dew on it, and sunbeams in the dewdrops. This must all be a dream, a dream, a dream. But it has quite hidden the 4 stone walls." Then his face darkened as if the shadow of a cavern or a dungeon had come over it. There was no more light in its expression than might have come through the iron gates of a prison window, still lessening, too, as if he were sinking farther into the depths. Phoebe, a being of that quickness and activity of temperament that she seldom long refrained from taking a part, and generally a good one, in what was going forward, now felt herself moved to address the stranger. "Here is a new kind of rose, which I found this morning in the garden," said she, choosing a small crimson one from among the flowers in the vase. "There will be but 5 or 6 on the bush this season. This is the most perfect of them all, not a speck of blight or mildew in it, and how sweet it is, sweet like no other rose. One can never forget that scent." "Ah, let me see, let me hold it," cried the guest, eagerly seizing the flower, which, by the spell peculiar to remembered odours, brought innumerable associations along with the fragrance that it exhaled. "Oh, thank you. This has done me good. I remember how I used to prize this flower long ago, I suppose very long ago. Or was it only yesterday? It makes me feel young again. Am I young? Either this remembrance is singularly distinct, or this consciousness strangely dim. But how kind of the fair young girl! Thank you, thank you." The favourable excitement derived from this little crimson rose afforded Clifford the brightest moment which he enjoyed at the breakfast table. It might have lasted longer, but that his eyes happened, soon afterwards, to rest on the face of the old Puritan, who, out of his dingy frame and lustreless canvas, was looking down on the scene like a ghost, and a most ill-tempered and ungenial one. The guest made an impatient gesture of the hand, and addressed Hepzibah with what might easily be recognized as the licensed irritability of a petted member of the family. "Hepzibah, Hepzibah," cried he, with no little force and distinctness, "why do you keep that odious picture on the wall? Yes, that is precisely your taste. I've told you 1,000 times that it was the evil genius of the house. My evil genius, particularly. Take it down at once." "Oh, dear Clifford," said Hepzibah sadly, "you know it cannot be." "Then, at all events," continued he, still speaking with some energy, "pray cover it with a crimson curtain, broad enough to hang in folds, and with a golden border and tassels. I cannot bear it. It must not stare me in the face." "Yes, dear Clifford, the picture shall be covered," said Hepzibah soothingly. "There is a crimson curtain in a trunk above stairs, a little faded and moth-eaten, I'm afraid, but Phoebe and I will work wonders with it." "This very day, remember," said he, and then added in a low, self-communing voice, "Why should we live in this dismal house at all? Why not go to the south of France, to Italy, Paris, Naples, Venice, Rome? Hepzibah will say we have not the means. A droll idea, that." He smiled to himself and threw a glance of fine sarcastic meaning toward Hepzibah. But the several moods of feeling, faintly as they were marked, through which he had passed, occurred in so brief an interval of time, had evidently wearied the stranger. He was probably accustomed to a sad monotony of life, not so much flowing in a stream, however sluggish, as stagnating in a pool around his feet. A slumberous veil diffused itself over his countenance, and had an effect, morally speaking, on its naturally delicate and elegant outline, like that which a brooding mist, which, with no sunshine in it, throws over the features of a landscape. He appeared to become grosser, almost cloddish. If aught of interest, or beauty, even ruined beauty, had heretofore been visible in this man, the beholder might now begin to doubt it, and to accuse his own imagination of deluding him with whatever grace had flickered over that visage, and whatever exquisite lustre had gleamed in those filmy eyes. Before he had quite sunken away, however, the sharp and peevish tinkle of the shop bell made itself audible. striking most disagreeably on Clifford's auditory organs and the characteristic sensibility of his nerves. It caused him to start upright out of his chair. "Good heavens, Hepzibah, what horrible disturbance have we now in the house?" cried he, wreaking his resentful impatience, as a matter of course and a custom of old, on the one person in the world that loved him. "I have never heard such a hateful clamour. Why do you permit it? In the name of all dissonance, what can it be?" It was very remarkable into what prominent relief, even as if a dim picture should leap suddenly from the canvas, Clifford's character was thrown by this apparently trifling annoyance. The secret was that an individual of his temper can always be pricked more acutely through his sense of the beautiful and harmonious than through his heart. It is even possible, for similar cases have often happened, that if Clifford, in his foregoing life, had enjoyed the means of cultivating his taste to its utmost perfectibility, that subtle attribute might, before this period, have completely eaten out or filed away his affections. Shall we venture to pronounce, therefore, that his long and black calamity may not have had a redeeming Shall we venture to pronounce, therefore, that his long and black calamity may not have had a redeeming drop of mercy at the bottom? "Oh, dear Clifford, I wish I could keep the sound from your ears," said Hepzibah patiently, but reddening with a painful suffusion of shame. "It is very disagreeable, even to me. But do you know, Clifford, I have something to tell you. This ugly noise— pray run, Phoebe, and see who is there. This naughty little tinkle is nothing but our shop bell." "Shop bell?" repeated Clifford with a bewildered stare. "Yes, our shop bell," said Hepzibah, a certain natural dignity mingled with deep emotion now asserting itself in her manner. "For you must know, dearest Clifford, that we are very poor, and there was no other resource but either to accept assistance from a hand that I would push aside, and so would you, were it to offer bread when we were dying for it. No help save from him, or else to earn our subsistence with my own hands. Alone I might have been content to starve, but you were to be given back to me. Do you think then, dear Clifford," added she, with a wretched smile, "that I have brought an irretrievable disgrace on the old house by opening a little shop in the front gable? Our great-great-grandfather did the same when there was far less need. Are you ashamed of me?" "Shame, disgrace! Do you speak these words to me, Hepzibah?" said Clifford, not angrily, however, for when a man's spirit has been thoroughly crushed, he may be peevish at small offences, but never resentful of great ones. So he spoke with only a grieved emotion. "It was not kind to say so, Hepzibah. What shame can befall me now?" And then the unnerved man, and then the unnerved man, he that had been born for enjoyment, but had met a doom so very wretched, burst into a woman's passion of tears. It was but of brief continuance, however, soon leaving him in a quiescent, and to judge by his countenance, not an uncomfortable state. From this mood, too, he partially rallied for an instant, and looked at Hepzibah with a smile, the keen, half-derisory purport of which was a puzzle to her. "Are we so very poor, Hepzibah?" said he. Finally, his chair being deep and softly cushioned, Clifford fell asleep. Hearing the more regular rise and fall of his breath, which, however, even then, instead of being strong and full, had a feeble kind of tremor, corresponding with the lack of vigor in his character. Hearing these tokens of settled slumber, Hepzibah seized the opportunity to peruse his face more attentively than she had yet dared to do. Her heart melted away in tears. Her profoundest spirit sent forth a moaning voice, low, gentle, but inexpressibly sad. In this depth of grief and pity, she felt there was no irreverence in gazing at his altered, aged, faded, ruined face. But no sooner was she a little relieved than her conscience smote her for gazing curiously at him, now that he was so changed. And turning hastily away, Hepzibah let down the curtain over the sunny window, and left Clifford to slumber there. All right, so the more we get into this, the more convinced I am that the ghosts in this story are gonna turn out to be guilt. That's what I'm guessing. That's what I'm guessing. Guilt and shame. Haunted by a family's past. I don't think it's going to be a ghost story. But I don't know. Maybe it will. Who knows? Who knows? Gianna says, I would not make it through this book by myself. Your reading level isn't this high. Tell you what, I'm stumbling a lot, Gianna. A lot. It's hard. William says, I don't think you're a mod here. You don't have the... Yeah, you are. I'm pretty sure you are. I think... Yeah, I don't know. Well, but maybe not. Maybe not. I think I made you a mod here when I used to restream from Mixer, I think. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? Man, I hope that microphone's not picking up my stomach growling. Because it's, boy, oh boy, it's hungry for a little something. Man, okay, all right. Let's do a quick little page count here. Just see how where we're at. This is chapter 8. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, no, that's not happening. Okay, so let's we're going to switch books here real fast. Yeah, because we're not going to have time to get through another chapter today. Not going to have time to get through another chapter. Who's not worthy of such affection there, Anya? You talking about William or Clifford? I don't know. All right. Okay. Let's see. I need an AFK thing for this. New Arabian Nights. We can let's get through another story of a Time in the Gods. Time in the Gods, and we'll continue with the House of the Seven Gables tomorrow. Yeah, because it's easily going to be another hour, easily another hour to get through the next chapter. It looks like a big one. Uh-oh. All right. So here we go. So, yeah, a little Lord Dunsany. We're still working our way through Time in the Gods. Have not read this book before. It's very good. It is quite good, quite good. It's one of his better books on the, I guess, like the genesis or creation of his fantasy lands there. What was the other one, which was Time the one which was not so good was the Gods of Pagania, which is just too much these and thous and just like just trying to be all too. It's just very stilted, very stilted. This one's better. Clifford's not worthy of affection. Okay, well, as we find out more about Clifford, but yeah, we don't really know much about him. Okay. We shall find out. Okay, in the meantime, though, here we go. We're going to roll on here. Let's see. Do we have anyone new in our live stream, by the way? Just may as well ask that before we get started on in here. Yeah, we do a live stream. Most of the things that we do here I've never read before. So this is an opportunity for me to practice my cold reading, get a little better at that. It's a big skill set. A little bit of improv. Nurse Rosetta. What? Rose Marie finally got there. Nurse Rosetta. Boy, oh boy. Yeah, that was from the Alice Cooper. Oh, which album was that? Was it Welcome to My Nightmare? I think it was on that one. Nurse Rosetta. Yeah, all right. Oh, you're catching up on chat. Oh, actually, that's a question I was meaning to ask. Like, does the chat in YouTube chat, does that like when you first pop in, can you see what has been said before, like Mixer used to do, or like is it just blank because you just got there like Twitch does it? Oh, it's from the inside. Yes, that's what, from the inside. That's it. Yeah. I couldn't remember it for the life of me. Yeah. That's like one of his one of his best albums, one of his best ones. Anya says they are new. All right, okay. I don't know. You never know. You never know. We had we had 12 people on here earlier, and I just thought we might have had some new people popping on in. If so, hello. And throw us a follow. So you see all that after refreshing? Okay, thank you for checking there, Rose. Thank you for checking. Okay, that's good. Yes, it's no good on Twitch. On Twitch, it's like totally blank, which is really annoying when you need to refresh your own page when the video player just quits working, which it does quite often. I can't believe it's so janky over there. Rose has me on the air, on the mobile, and at desk while typing. Nice. Okay, here we go. We're going to finish up. This will probably bring us close to the top of the hour, this one here. This is from Lord Dunsany's Time and the Gods. For the honor of the gods. Of the great wars of the three islands are many histories writ, and of how the heroes of the olden time one by one were slain. But naught is told of the days before the olden time, or ever the people of the isles went forth to war, when each in his own land tended cattle or sheep, and listless peace obscured those isles in the days before the olden time. For then the people of the islands played like children about the feet of chance, and had no gods, and went not forth to war. But sailors, cast by strange winds upon those shores, which they named the prosperous isles, and finding a happy people which had no gods, told how they should be happier still, and know the gods, and fight for the honor of the gods, and leave their names writ large in histories, and at the last die, proclaiming the names of the gods. And the people of the islands met, and said, The beasts we know, but lo, these sailors tell of things beyond, that know us as we know the beasts, and use us for their pleasure as we use the beasts, but yet are apt to answer idle prayer, flung up at evening near the hearth, when a man returneth from the ploughing of the fields. Shall we now seek these gods? And some said, We are lords of the three islands, and have none to trouble us, and while we live we find prosperity, and when we die our bones have ease in the quiet. Let us not therefore seek those who may loom greater than we do in the islands three, or haply harry our bones when we are dead.
But others said, "The prayers that a man mutters when the drought hath come and all the cattle die go up unheeded to the heedless clouds. And if somewhere there be those that garner prayer, let us send men to seek them, and to say, There be men in the isles called Three, or sometimes named by sailors the Prosperous Isles, and they be in the central sea, who ofttimes pray, and it hath been told us that ye love the worship of men, and for it answer prayer, and we be travellers from the islands three." And the people of the islands were greatly allured by the thought of strange things, neither men nor beasts, who at evening answered prayer. Therefore they sent men down in ships with sails to sail across the sea, and in safety over the sea to a far shore chance brought the ships. Then over hill and valley 3 men set forth, seeking to find the gods, and their comrades beached the ships and waited on the shore. And they that sought the gods followed for 30 nights the lightnings in the sky over 5 mountains, and as they came to the summit of the last, they saw a valley beneath them, and lo, the gods. For there the gods sat, each on a marble hill, each sitting with an elbow on his knee, and his chin upon his hand. And all the gods were smiling about their lips. And below them there were armies of little men, and about the feet of the gods they fought against each other, and slew one another for the honor of the gods, and for the glory of the name of the gods. And round them in the valley their cities that they had builded with the toil of their hands, they burned for the honor of the gods, where they died for the honor of the gods. And the gods looked down and smiled. And up from the valley fluttered the prayers of men, and here and there the gods did answer a prayer, but oftentimes they mocked him, and all the while men died. And they that had sought the gods from the islands 3, having seen what they had seen, lay down on the mountain summit, lest the gods should see them. Then they crept backward a little space, still lying down, and whispered together, and then stooped low and ran, and travelled across the mountains in 20 days, and came again to their comrades by the shore. But their comrades asked them if their quest had failed, and the 3 men only answered, "We have seen the gods." And setting sail, the ships hove back across the central sea, and came again to the islands 3, where rest the feet of chance, and said to the people, "We have seen the gods." But to the rulers of the islands they told how the gods drove men in herds, and went back and tended their flocks again, all in the prosperous isles, and were kinder to their cattle after they had seen how that the gods used men. But the gods, walking large about their valley, and peering over the great mountain's rim, saw one morning the tracks of the 3 men. Then the gods bent their faces low over the tracks, and leaning forward ran, and came before the evening of the day to the shore where the men had set sail in ships, and saw the tracks of ships upon the sand, and waded far out into the sea, and yet saw naught. Still it had been well for the islands 3, had not certain men that had heard the traveller's tale sought also to see the gods themselves. These in the night time slipped away from the isles in ships, And ere the gods had retreated to the hills, they saw where ocean meets with sky the full white sails of those that sought the gods upon an evil day. Then for a while the people of those gods had rest, while the gods lurked behind the mountain, waiting for the travelers from the prosperous isles. But the travelers came to shore, and beached their ships, and sent 6 of their number to the mountain whereof they had been told. But they, after many days, returned, having not seen the gods, but only the smoke that went upward from burned cities, and vultures that stood in the sky, instead of answered prayer. And they all ran down their ships again into the sea, and set sail again, and came to the prosperous isles. But in the distance, crouching behind the ships, the gods came wading through the sea, that they might have the worship of the isles. And to every isle of the 3, the gods showed themselves in different garb and guise, and to all they said, "Leave your flocks, go forth and fight for the honor of the gods." And from one of the isles all the folk came forth in ships to battle for gods that strode through the isle like kings. And from another they came to fight for gods that walked like humble men upon the earth in beggars' rags. And the people of the other isle fought for the honor of gods that were clothed in hair like beasts, and had many gleaming eyes and claws upon their foreheads. But of how these people fought till the isles grew desolate, but very glorious, and for all the fame of the gods, are many histories writ. Ooh, yeah, no, that's interesting. That was shorter than I thought it was going to be as well. Much shorter. What do we have here? Can see. Strange case. Okay, 1 second. Let me turn this off for 1 second. 1 second. Just trying to find my how do I see if I turn off. Oh, okay, that's how we do it. All right. Yeah, still getting used to this here. I just need to find something. We still got. Do we got time for another little short story? But trying to find something. Okay, got to be something in here. 1500 eternal masterpiece fairy tales. Very nice. Okay, so we've read some stuff from this before. 1 second, let me just pull that up again. Yeah, we'll find something good in here. Andrew Lang, who's that? I don't know. Have we read anything from this? The Bronze Ring. Wow, this dude wrote a lot. Good Lord. Oh, no, that's going to be way too long. Okay, this person writes long stuff. Okay, we just need something to fill up 15 minutes or so. 15 minutes. Alexander Chodzko. A Polish poem, yeah. That looks like a three-parter. Long. Good Lord. Multi-parter as well. Man. Okay, what do we have from Anonymous? Oh, we started the Hans Christian Andersen. Everyone knows him. 1805. Good Lord. Let's do this first one. I don't know. It's probably going to take us over our time, but that's fine. Okay. Okay. The very first thing by Hans Christian Andersen. Now, I don't know if these are in the order that he wrote them. I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know a lot about that guy. Except, was it Johnny K? I think was in a movie about him. Something like that. All right. The Tinder-Box. A soldier came marching along the high road. Left, right, left, right. He had his knapsack on his back and a sword at his side. He had been to the wars and was now returning home. As he walked on, he met a very frightful-looking old witch in the road. Her underlip hung quite down on her breast, and she stopped and said, "Good evening, soldier. You have a very fine sword and a very large knapsack, and you are a real soldier, so you shall have as much money as ever you like." "Well, thank you, old witch," said the soldier. "Do you see that large tree?" said the witch, pointing to a tree which stood beside them. "Well, it is quite hollow, and you must climb to the top, when you will see a hole through which you can let yourself down into the tree. To a great depth. I will tie a rope around your body so that I can pull you up again when you call out to me." "Oh, but what am I to do down there in the tree?" asked the soldier. "Get money," she replied, "for you must know that when you reach the ground under the tree you'll find yourself in a large hall, lighted up by 300 lamps. You will then see 3 doors, which can be easily opened, for the keys are all in the locks. On entering the first of the chambers, to which these doors lead, you will see a large chest standing in the middle of the floor, and upon it a dog seated, with a pair of eyes as large as teacups. But you need not be at all afraid of him. I will give you my blue checkered apron, which you must spread upon the floor, and then boldly seize hold of the dog and place him upon it. You can then open the chest, and take from it as many pence as you please. They are only copper pence, but if you would rather have silver money, you must go to the second chamber. Here you will find another dog, with eyes as big as mill wheels. But do not let that trouble you. Place him upon my apron, and then take what money you please. If, however, you like gold best, enter the third chamber, where there is another chest full of it. The dog who sits on this chest is very dreadful. His eyes are as big as a tower, but do not mind him. If he also is placed upon my apron, he cannot hurt you, and you may take from the chest what gold you will." "Oh, this is not a bad story," said the soldier. "But what am I to give you, you old witch? For of course you do not mean to tell me all this for nothing." "No," said the witch, "but I do not ask for a single penny. Only promise to bring me an old tinder-box which my grandmother left behind the last time she went down there." "Very well, I promise. Now tie the rope round my body." "Here it is," replied the witch, "and here is my blue checkered apron." As soon as the rope was tied, the soldier climbed up the tree, and let himself down through the hollow to the ground beneath. And here he found, as the witch had told him, a large hall in which many hundred lamps were all burning. Then he opened the first door. Ah, there sat the dog, with the eyes as large as teacups, staring at him. "Oh, you're a pretty fellow," said the soldier, seizing him and placing him on the witch's apron, while he filled his pockets from the chest with as many pieces as they would hold. Then he closed the lid, seated the dog upon it again, and walked into another chamber, and sure enough there sat the dog, with eyes as big as mill wheels. "You had better not look at me in that way," said the soldier. "You will make your eyes water." And then he seated him also upon the apron and opened the chest. But when he saw what a quantity of silver money it contained, he very quickly threw away all the coppers he had taken, and filled his pockets and knapsack with nothing but silver. Then he went into the third room, and there the dog was really hideous. His eyes were truly as big as towers, and they turned round and round in his head like wheels. "Good morning," said the soldier, touching his cap, for he had never seen such a dog in his life. But after looking at him more closely, he thought he had been civil enough, so he placed him on the floor and opened the chest. Good gracious, what a quantity of gold there was, enough to buy all the sugar sticks of the sweet-stuff women, all the tin soldiers, whips, and rocking horses in the world, or even the whole town itself. There was indeed an immense quantity. So the soldier now threw away all the silver money he had taken, and filled his pockets and knapsack with gold instead. And not only his pockets and his knapsack, but even his caps and boots, so that he could scarcely walk. He was really rich now, so he replaced the dog on the chest, closed the door, and called up through the tree, "Now pull me up, you old witch." "Have you got the tinder-box?" asked the witch. No, I declare I quite forgot it." So he went back and fetched the tinder-box, and then the witch drew him up out of the tree, and he stood again in the high road, with his pockets, his knapsack, his cap, and his boots full of gold. "What are you going to do with the tinder-box?" asked the soldier. "That's nothing to you," replied the witch. "You have the money, now give me the tinder-box." "I'll tell you what," said the soldier. "If you don't tell me what you're going to do with it, I will draw my sword and cut off your head." "No," said the witch. The soldier immediately cut off her head, and there she lay on the ground. Then he tied up all his money in her apron, and slung it on his back like a bundle, put the tinder-box in his pocket, and walked off to the nearest town. It was a very nice town, and he put up at the best inn, and ordered a dinner of all his favorite dishes, for now he was rich and had plenty of money. The servant who cleaned his boots thought they certainly were a shabby pair to be worn by such a rich gentleman, for he had not yet bought any new ones. The next day, however, he procured some good clothes and proper boots, so that our soldier soon became known as a fine gentleman, and the people visited him, and told him all the wonders that were to be seen in the town, and of the king's beautiful daughter, the princess. "Where can I see her?" asked the soldier. "She's not to be seen at all," they said. "She lives in a large copper castle, surrounded by walls and towers. No one but the king himself can pass in or out, for there has been a prophecy that she will marry a common soldier, and the king cannot bear to think of such a marriage." "I should very much like to see her," thought the soldier. But he could not obtain permission to do so. "I think you're right, Rose. I don't think this is going to end well." However, he passed a very pleasant time, went to the theatre, drove in the king's garden, and gave a... Drove? Yeah. However, he passed a very pleasant time, went to the theatre, drove in the king's garden, and gave a great deal of money to the poor, which was very good of him. He remembered what it had been in olden times to be without a shilling. Now he was rich, had fine clothes, and many friends, who all declared he was a fine fellow and a real gentleman, and all this gratified him exceedingly. But his money would not last forever, and as he spent and gave away a great deal daily, and received none, he found himself at last with only 2 shillings left. So he was obliged to leave his elegant rooms, and live in a little garret under the roof, where he had to clean his own boots, and even mend them with a large needle. None of his friends came to see him. There were too many stairs to mount up. One dark evening he had not even a penny to buy a candle. And then all at once he remembered that there was a piece of candle stuck in the tinder-box which he had brought from the old tree, into which the witch had helped him. He found the tinder-box, but no sooner had he struck a few sparks from the flint and steel than the door flew open, and the dog with eyes as big as teacups, whom he had seen while down in the tree, stood before him and said, "What orders, master?" "Hello," said the soldier. "Well, this is a pleasant tinder-box, if it brings me all I wish for." "Bring me some money?" said he to the dog. He was gone in a moment, and presently returned, carrying a large bag of coppers in his mouth. The soldier very soon discovered, after this, the value of the tinder-box. If he struck the flint once, the dog, who sat on the chest of copper money, made his appearance. If twice, the dog came from the chest of silver, and if 3 times, the dog with eyes like towers, who watched over the gold. The soldier had now plenty of money. He returned to his elegant rooms, and reappeared in his fine clothes, so that his friends knew him again directly, and made as much of him as before. Some friends. After a while he began to think it was very strange that no one could get a look at the princess. "Everyone says she's very beautiful," thought he to himself, "but what is the use of that if she is to be shut up in a copper castle surrounded by so many towers? Can I by any means get to see her? Stop, where's my tinder-box?" Then he struck a light, and in a moment the dog with eyes as big as teacups stood before him. "It's midnight," said the soldier, "yet I should very much like to see the princess, if only for a moment." The dog disappeared instantly, and before the soldier could even look around, he returned with the princess. She was lying on the dog's back asleep, and looked so lovely that everyone who saw her would know she was a real princess. The soldier could not help kissing her, true soldier as he was. Then the dog ran back with the princess. But in the morning, while at breakfast with the king and queen, she told them what a singular dream she had had during the night, of a dog and a soldier, that she had ridden on the dog's back and been kissed by the soldier. "Oh, that's a very pretty story indeed," said the queen. So the next night one of the old ladies of the court was set to watch by the princess's bed, to discover whether it really was a dream, or what else it might be. The soldier longed very much to see the princess once more, so he sent for the dog again in the night to fetch her, and to run with her as fast as ever he could. But the old lady put on water boots, and ran after him as quickly as he did, and found that he carried the princess into a large house. She thought it would help her to remember the place if she made a large cross on the door with a piece of chalk. Then she went home to bed, and the dog presently returned with the princess. But when he saw that a cross had been made on the door of the house where the soldier lived, he took another piece of chalk and made crosses on all the doors in the town, so that the lady-in-waiting might not be able to find out the right door. Early the next morning, the king and queen accompanied the lady and all the officers of the household to see where the princess had been. "Here it is," said the king, when they had come to the first door with a cross on it. "Oh, no, my dear husband, it must be that one," said the queen, pointing to a second door having a cross also. "And here's one, and there's another," they all exclaimed, for there were crosses on all the doors in every direction. And so they felt it would be useless to search any farther. But the queen was a very clever woman. She could do a great deal more than merely ride in a carriage. She took her large gold scissors, cut a piece of silk into squares, and made a neat little bag. This bag she filled with buckwheat flour, and tied it round the princess's neck, and then she cut a small hole in the bag, so that the flour might be scattered on the ground as the princess went along. During the night the dog came again and carried the princess on his back, and ran with her to the soldier, who loved her very much, and wished that he had been a prince, so that he might have her for a wife. The dog did not observe how the flour ran out of the bag all the way from the castle wall to the soldier's house, and even up to the window, where he had climbed with the princess. Very nimble dog. Therefore in the morning the king and queen found out where their daughter had been, and the soldier was taken up and put in prison. Oh, how dark and disagreeable it was as he sat there, and the people said to him, "Tomorrow you will be hanged." It was not very pleasant news, and besides he had left the tinder-box at the inn. In the morning he could see through the iron grating of the little window how the people were hastening out of the town to see him hanged. He heard the drums beating and saw the soldiers marching. Every one ran out to look at them, and a shoemaker's boy, with a leather apron and slippers on, galloped by so fast that one of his slippers flew off and struck against the wall where the soldier sat, looking through the iron grating. "Hello, you shoemaker's boy, you need not be in such a hurry," cried the soldier to him. "There will be nothing to see till I come. But if you will run to the house where I have been living, and bring me my tinder-box, you shall have 4 shillings. But you must put your best foot foremost." The shoemaker's boy liked the idea of getting the 4 shillings, so he ran very fast, and fetched the tinder-box and gave it to the soldier. And now we shall see what happened. Outside the town a large gibbet had been erected, round which stood the soldiers and several thousands of people. The king and the queen sat on splendid thrones, opposite to the judges and the whole council. The soldier already stood on the ladder, but as they were about to place the rope round his neck, he said that an innocent request was often granted to a poor criminal before he suffered death. He wished very much to smoke a pipe, as it would be the last pipe he should ever smoke in the world. Well, the king could not refuse this request, so the soldier, they got some weird laws. The king could not refuse this request, so the soldier took his tinder-box and struck fire, once, twice, thrice, and there in a moment stood all the dogs, the one with eyes as big as teacups, the one with eyes as large as mill-wheels, and the third whose eyes were like towers. "Help me now, that I may not be hanged," cried the soldier. And the dogs fell upon the judges and all the councillors, seized one by the legs and another by the nose, and tossed them many feet high in the air, so they all fell down and were dashed to pieces. "I will not be touched," said the king. But the largest dog seized him, as well as the queen, and threw them after the others. Then the soldiers and all the people were afraid, and cried, "Oh, good soldier, you shall be our king, and you shall marry the beautiful princess." So they placed the soldier in the king's carriage, and the 3 dogs ran on in front, and cried, "Hurrah!" and the little boys whistled through their fingers, and the soldiers presented arms. The princess came out of the copper castle, and became queen, which was very pleasing to her. The wedding festivities lasted a whole week, and the dogs sat at the table and stared with all their eyes. You know what? That's not exactly how I thought that was going to end. Not quite. Not quite. That did. Tell you what, boy, I mean, normally when you, normally bad things kind of happen in situations like that. But I don't know. Maybe the moral is go out, do a little thievery, do a little murder. You shall be king. Yeah, that was okay. That definitely subverted expectations. Actually, you know what would be really fun to do at some point would be the Little Mermaid, because I remember that having not a Disney ending. Yeah, I think it was Hans Christian Andersen wrote that one, right? The Little Mermaid, pretty sure.